Some hope to control their destiny by building. Others through science or by conquest. Do they not see that only dust can give them what they want? For it is money and power and magic, all intertwined in a single miraculous substance. It is the essence that binds our civilizations together. Perhaps, as we let them believe, it is our weakness. But I have seen its wonders. It is not our weakness. It is rather how we will rule them all.
Endless Legend is a fantasy-themed 4X game where you'll put all of those X's to work. That's right, gotta put the glasses on for this one. You'll explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate your way through hours of turn-based gameplay. Yeah, it's a lot like Civ, but comparisons to the king of the genre should be taken as a compliment, and the game does do things much differently from its competitor. For starters, you'll quickly find units can stack on the same tile and form groups of units referred to as armies. This was done in past Civ games and created battles consisting of stacks of doom. Actual strategy in warfare was needless as you could just make a million cheap and worthless units. This was solved in Civ 5, where units could not stack, but created a problem where armies were time-consuming to move about. To avoid both issues, Endless Legend employs a clever method of allowing stacked units, but puts a limit on how many units can be stacked onto the same hexagon. To further the strategic depth of combat, when two armies face each other, they enter into a sort of tactics minigame. Frivolous details on the map are erased and give way to clear vision of the battlefield, as your stack of doom is separated into its smaller parts. In this separate mode, units cannot stack, allowing for the deeper combat of Civ 5. When the battle is complete, all surviving units pile back into the same hexagon for easier management, like in Civ 4. This tactics minigame is clever for more reasons than just ease of use. As battles separate from the main game to focus on a specific battlefield, turns in the main game are suspended and the two opposing forces will take 6 turns to decide the outcome. In this way, an entire enemy army can be wiped out in a single turn. As units tend to take more than one turn to produce, warfare is not to be taken as lightly as it is in Civ. Every casualty has the potential to be devastating to not only the specific war, but even the game as a whole. And to make pacifists a little more on edge, war will be conducted at some point in the game, no matter how safe you want to play. Send your thanks to minor factions, which are best described as a combination of barbarians and city-states from Civ 5. If left alone, they will spawn roaming armies, which will attack cities, units, and settlers. You can choose to destroy them or pacify them through bribery or by contacting them and forming an alliance, which involves undertaking a quest. Quests range from eliminating a rival faction, bringing them a valuable resource, or proving your diplomatic ability with major civs. Once pacified, you can assimilate them into your culture and use their units as well as their specific faction trait. With intelligent AI, unafraid of using their militaries and using them well, Endless Legend is a much more difficult game than Civilization, even on its easier difficulties. This extends to areas outside of combat as well. For instance, the early game seemed in favor of quick expansion. The game's overworld, if you will, was split into provinces encompassing large numbers of tiles. If a city is founded within a province, the entire province is claimed as territory belonging to the founding civ. Civs can quickly claim vast swaths of land and resources, depriving slower to expand civs from needed materials later in the game. There are penalties for rapid expansion, such as disapproval from your people, but the AI doesn't seem to care much. For us humans, managing cities is a more involved process. When a city grows in population, you gain an extra citizen to work the fields. In Civ, this is automated. In Endless Legend, it is not. Or at least, I didn't see an automate option. If you are not paying careful attention, you may find a city putting every available man, woman, and child into research and not realizing how food is becoming scarce. You may think you can simply organize your worker bees once and never touch it again, but the game's fantasy setting will then kick in and throw an increasingly lengthy series of winters upon the world, putting a penalty on nearly every aspect of the game's mechanics. Notably food and money, but it also affects the visibility and movement of armies. In between dealing with expanding borders and micromanaging citizens, you'll have to take time from precious turns to expand cities outward from the original tile. Yes, cities will become crowded and less growth will be permitted unless new boroughs are constructed. Extra living space will provide smoother growth and also grants the city access to more resources, as cities can only harvest research, money, food, and production from tiles directly surrounding the city. Strategic resources, thankfully, work different and only require the city to build an improvement over them. This will, however, distract the city from making other improvements because there is no actual worker unit in this game, leaving cities as the sole producer of all needed resources. It becomes very apparent that every turn in this game is valuable. Nothing is to be taken for granted. There are systems upon systems in this game, all competing for the player's attention. Relative to Civ, there are very few turns in which nothing of consequence occurs. It's easy to get lost in it all. Unfortunately, there is no real way to ease yourself into Endless Legend. The tutorial only covers the basics of maintaining your civilization and encourages the player to discover the more advanced features on their own. For instance, diplomacy with competing civs is paid little attention, and there is no word on what the victory conditions are. From what I've seen, you can win the game through eliminating all other civs, researching the last tier of technologies, and by controlling 75% of the world's provinces. There is also a diplomatic and economic victory in the game, I believe, but I have no clue in what way to be diplomatic or how much money I need. The game could have benefited immensely from being upfront with these details, especially with every turn being so valuable. Civ-specific story quests mitigate this issue slightly and help new players discover some buried features. For instance, if you don't know much about how to gather the influence currency, a quest might force you to figure it out by making it your objective to have a city gather 10 influence a turn. Once that's completed, you'll be rewarded with not only an in-game benefit, but a bit of story to tie all the civs, factions, and events into a lore that's fairly interesting. Story quests are an effective carrot on the stick to convince players to play as every civ and interact with every playstyle the game has to offer. And when it comes to playstyles, Endless Legend has you covered. In fact, if you aren't satisfied with the 8 drastically different civs the game provides, you can actually make your own by choosing one civ for their units and main unique trait, and then selecting amongst a variety of lesser traits. It's a noble idea that could potentially lead to hours of experimentation and replay value. Endless Legend takes pride in cramming every ounce of complexity it can into every single turn. This makes it a very interesting puzzle to solve for those who just spent the last 500 hours playing Civ games, but maybe not so if you're just getting into the genre. If you're in the latter group, understand that it's a very well designed game, but maybe not designed in a way that makes it accessible.